Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei x Gabriel x Rainer x Calawarner x Middle Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the king of plot bunnies for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Thank you for your patronage. A brown-haired boy bowed as he handed the customer's order. Please, come again. That'll be our last walk-in for the day, a middle-aged man called out. Just close up the front and we'll take care of everything else. Good work today, Haidu. Thanks, boss. The boy called back as he walked to the front door and flipped the store sign from open to closed. I'm still amazed that the boss likes you so much, Issei-san, a short brown-haired girl remarked. She took off the hat of her uniform to fan herself after working the fryers all day. He's so grumpy and mean to everyone else. I just tried my best, Chiho, the boy, Issei, replied with a smile. I'd better get going. It's getting late and I start at my new school tomorrow. Are you? Chiho asked, her voice brimming with thinly veiled curiosity. Which school? The place called Kuoh Academy, Issei replied, as the two began walking towards the employee lockers. The girl's eyes widened. Kuoh? She gasped as the two entered the locker room, where a screen divided the male section from the female section. Issei entered the left side while Chiho entered the right side. Yup. He answered with a smile, though she couldn't see it. Wow. Chiho's voice exclaimed. I heard the tuition to that place is expensive. If you can afford to go there, why are you working at McDonald's? Under normal circumstances, it would be, Issei conceded. But the school just recently became co-ed, so the Board of Education decided to lower the tuition fees to draw in more students. A complete lie, of course. He'd instead used a hypnosis spell to get himself enrolled. The poor boy didn't even have enough money to enroll in a public high school. Is that so? The girl hummed as they finished changing and exited the locker room. Maybe I'll transfer there. We could hang out every day. We already hang out at work every day, Chiho, Issei chuckled. The two exited the restaurant and Issei began unchaining his bike from the bike rack. It's not the same. Chiho exclaimed, puffing her cheeks in a show of frustration. She turned away from him and began muttering to herself. How am I supposed to experience my teenage romantic comedy if we're not in the same school? Did you say something? Issei questioned, glancing over his shoulder at her. Nothing. The girl squeaked, waving her arms frantically. Anyway, I live in the opposite direction, so I'll see you after school tomorrow. Actually, the boss gave me the next few days off. Issei told her. What? Yeah, he said it was to give me time to get used to my new school. Damn that man. Chiho muttered. Did you say something? Nothing. The girl shouted nervously. I'll see you when you get back then. Bye. With that the girl began sprinting in the opposite direction Issei was going. What a strange girl, the brown-haired boy muttered. He shrugged. Oh, well. And with that he mounted his bike and began the long trek home. I'm back. Issei called as he stepped into his apartment. Welcome home, Issei-sama. A male voice called out to him from inside. The brown-haired boy slipped his shoes off and stepped into the place he'd been calling home since arriving in Japan. The apartment was cramped, to say the least. His home consisted of a single room that contained a small kitchen, a kotatsu, and two futons rolled up in the corner. On the wall nearest the front door was a small closet in which they kept their belongings. On the far wall was the door to a tiny, but functional bathroom. Currently standing in the kitchen was a tall, white-haired man that appeared to be in his early 20s. He wore a black sweatshirt and gray trousers. Over his outfit he wore an olive-green apron which was currently stained with whatever it was he was cooking. What are you making, Ashiya? Issei asked as he collapsed at the kotatsu. Smells great. I thought we'd eat something special to celebrate your recent enrollment, Issei-sama, the white-haired man said. He grinned as he brought the plates over. Issei's eyes widened. That's Katsuden. I know. The man cried. I've been secretly saving for weeks so we could afford the ingredients. I wanted this to feel special. The brown-haired boy placed his hands on Asia's shoulder. Ashiya cried, tears running down his face. You truly are my closest friend. The two held each other as they sobbed for their broken wallets. Ashiya. Issei-sama. Ashiya. Issei-sama. Boy, white-haired freak, a feminine voice called out. Hands off my master. The two young men turned to see nothing. Down here. They looked down to see a small puppet glaring at them. The puppet had lime green hair with matching eyes and had two metallic protrusions where her ears should have been. Dressed like a tiny maid, she would have looked cute if it wasn't for the psychotic gleam in her eyes. That wretched doll. Ashiya scowled. What the fuck did you call me? Tachizero, Issei sighed. Down, girl. Yes master. The doll's tone suddenly became sweet and innocent. as though she hadn't been 2 seconds away from slitting Asia's throat. I don't understand why you insist on keeping that doll, Issei-sama, Ashia scowled at the puppet. She stuck her tongue out at him in response. She's not that bad, Ashia, the brown-haired boy defended his familiar as he began eating. She was a gift, remember? Ah, yes, the man muttered as he, too, began to eat. From that vampire wench, correct? The one that made it her mission in life to bed you? Issei coughed. Yes, her, he said with a quick nod. I can see why she was so eager to get rid of it, Ashia remarked dryly. Fuck you too, Chachamaru said offhandedly. So, why did she give you her familiar? The white-haired man asked curiously. My former master believed that I would drive Issei-sama insane. He would then come crawling back to her in tears, pleading to take me back. Chachamaru explained cheerfully. She would then give him an ultimatum. Become her life mate or suffer for the rest of eternity. Both men were stunned into silence. But my new master is too awesome to fall for such a petty scheme. The puppet cried, pumping her fist enthusiastically. Hey, master, can I feed you? Issei blinked at the sudden change in subject. Sure, Zero-chan, the puppet squealed happily. She reached up, grabbing hold of one of her metallic ears and pulled, unsheathing a 6-inch knife. That never fails to disturb me, Ashia muttered, staring at the blade as the puppet stabbed some food and fed it to her master. You realize those same knives have most likely taken the lives of dozens, if not hundreds, of people. Oh, come on, Ashia, Issei rolled his eyes. Yeah, the puppet agreed. It was way more than that. The two men paused. Whatever. Issei-sama. Our hands aren't exactly clean either, Alciel. Of course, Mau-sama. So this is Kuoh Academy, huh? Issei muttered as he stood at the front gates in his new uniform. He could see why tuition was so expensive. His wallet felt lighter just looking at the elegant buildings and immaculate school grounds. A series of muffled noises coming from inside his bag drew the attention of several of his fellow students. He waved at them sheepishly before ducking behind a nearby tree. Kneeling down, he opened his bag and quickly silenced the offender with a flick to the forehead. Ow. Chachamaru grunted, rubbing at the afflicted spot. Zero-chan, we agreed that if you want to come, you need to be quiet. But why do you have to stuff me in that cramped-ass bag of yours? What else would you have me do? Issei sighed. I can't exactly carry you around without drawing some rather unwanted attention to myself. Why not? The doll asked with a pout. Don't worry, master. I'll slice up anyone that gives you trouble. Do you remember why we came to Japan in the first place? He asked, his voice deadpan. Chachamaru averted her eyes. Zero-chan. It was that bitch's fault. You provoked her into attacking us. Issei snapped. She ended up destroying the city. We had to flee the country. It's not my fault she's a complete klutz. The puppet snapped in return. I swear she can't even tie her own shoes without help. Ugh, now I've got a massive headache, the brown-haired boy sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Alright, Zero-chan, if I let you out, you have to stay completely still around other people, okay? Got it, Master Chachamaru saluted him before leaping on top of his head. Shotgun. I don't even have the strength to argue with you anymore, Issei muttered as he began making his way to his new classroom. There was no one in the halls, so he could only assume that he was late. Finding his class after several minutes of searching, he knocked on the door before sliding it open. As one, the class's eyes turned towards him. Ah, you must be the new student, the teacher exclaimed. Please, come in and introduce yourself. Doing as instructed, he stepped into the classroom. Immediately whispers began flying throughout the room. The new student. He's kinda cute. What's with the doll? Issei walked to the chalkboard and wrote his name twice, once in kanji and again in hiragana. He turned towards the class and smiled his best smile, nearly causing several girls to swoon. Hello, everyone, my name is Haidu Issei, the brown-haired boy introduced himself. I've only recently returned to Japan after living overseas for most of my life. I hope we can be friends. He finished with a polite bow. Does anyone have any questions for Haidu-kun? The teacher asked. Several hands went up. Issei pointed at a girl wearing glasses. Yes. The brunette girl stood, adjusting her glasses. Kuryu Aika, she introduced herself, staring at the puppet lying prone atop his head. What's with the doll, Haidu-kun? Ah, it was given to me by a dear friend of mine, Issei answered. Chachamaru pulled on his hair for calling her an it, but he ignored her. I carry it with me so I will never forget that person. The puppet on his head let out a scoff, which was thankfully drowned out by the chorus of awe by the girls of the class. Another girl stood, a desperate look on her face. Was this person a girlfriend? Issei coughed. No, she wasn't. She wanted to be much more, Chachamaru whispered snidely. Thankfully, her remark was drowned out by sighs of relief from several females. Issei's eye twitched. he would have to discipline her later. Though with how much she seemed to enjoy his punishments, he didn't see much point in it. The boy stood this time. Name's Mitsuda. My question is this. Why did you come here? Popular guys should just die. Fortunately, Issei didn't have to answer, as Mitsuda was swiftly mauled by half of the females in the room. After the teacher managed to restore order, he assigned Issei a seat by the window and began class. As Issei sat down, he closed his eyes. I can sense quite a few devils in this school. He knew that the school consisted of 3 stories. First years on floor 1, second years on floor 2 and third years on floor 3. He was currently in room 2A. He could sense a devil next door in room 2B and 5 more in 2C. 6 devils, he muttered to himself as he stared out the window. The teacher placed him in the back row on the left side of the room, right next to the window. For some reason, this felt cliché to him. 6 devils on this floor alone, but they all seem low class in terms of power. Well, Haidu-kun, the teacher said, returning Issei from his musing. Since you seem so talkative, why don't you tell me the answer? 327.65, the brown-haired boy said after glancing at the problem in question. That's correct, the teacher muttered as the class looked at him in astonishment. Very good, Haidu-kun. Issei spent the rest of class gazing out the window, answering whatever questions the teacher threw at him. Needless to say, by the end of the day, he had become the talk of the school. And as he walked off the school grounds towards home, he was well aware that someone was watching him. Some distance away, 2 beautiful young women were unaware they had already been detected. One of them, a stunning Caucasian girl with green eyes and crimson red hair, watched the new student with rapt attention. So, that's the famous Haidu Issei-kun. He's only been here for a day, but he's already made quite a name for himself, the other, a black-haired girl said with a serene smile. The mysterious boy from overseas with a genius intellect and a handsome appearance. Kiba-kun's rival for the title of school prince. How interesting, the red-haired girl licked her lips and grinned. I'll be keeping a close eye on you, Haidu Issei-kun. I'm back. Issei called out as he and Chachamaru stepped into their apartment. Welcome home, Issei-sama. Ashiya called out in return. The brown-haired boy slid his shoes off and entered the sole room of their apartment. Did anything of interest happen today? There seems to be quite a few devils attending the school, Issei replied as Chachamaru hopped off his head and onto the katatsu. Most of them seem low class in terms of power, the puppet continued for him. Though 2 of them seemed mid-class. We believe they are pure-blooded devils, with the others being their servants. Ah, the evil P system, as I recall, Ashiya commented as he took his own seat at the katatsu. He reached into his back pocket, revealing an envelope. Issei-sama, we've received a missive from the others. Issei took the proffered message and read for several moments before nodding. The others will be arriving in short order. Where'd they all go anyway? The green-haired puppet asked curiously. Well, when we had to flee the country, Issei began, prompting the puppet to cock her head in faux innocence. We were forced to scatter. Really? Chachamaru muttered, rubbing her tiny chin. I don't remember any of that. I believe you were too busy trying to kill everything around you to notice, the brown-haired boy deadpanned. Ah, yes, the doll nodded, a nostalgic smile on her face. That I remember. Issei let out a sigh. Well, anyway. I'm home. A voice called out, causing all 3 to freeze. As one, they turned to see Ashiya standing at the doorway with a stunned expression on his face. His arms were laden with groceries from the 100-yen store. Ashiya? Issei questioned in surprise. He turned back to the white-haired man sitting across from him, his eyes narrowed. Tamamo. Ashiya let out a playful smirk before being enveloped in a cloud of smoke. Poof. When the smoke cleared, Ashiya had disappeared. In his place sat a beautiful girl with light reddish-pink hair and mischievous amber eyes. Her hair was tied into long pigtails using a large blue ribbon. She wore a dark blue and black kimono that left her shoulders completely exposed and gave him an ample view of her sizable bust. Her figure was slim and attractive, further emphasized by the elegant black and gold obi tied around her waist. And though the outfit left her shoulders exposed, the arms of her kimono remained, an imitation of arm warmers. The kimono itself cut off at her upper thigh, giving him a good look at the milky skin of her legs, before it gave way to dark purple stockings. And though she currently wore no shoes, Issei knew she kept a pair of elegant black Jetta sandals. However, her most exotic features were by far the canine-esque ears jutting from the top of her head. That, as well as the long bushy tail that was currently swaying behind her in amusement. Guilty as charged, Master Tamamo giggled. Oh, great, Chachamaru groaned. The fox girl. The only sign she heard the puppet was the twitching of her ears. Instead, the fox girl latched onto Issei's arm, pressing her breasts against him provocatively. Oh, I missed you so much, Master. Issei smiled wanly. I missed you, too, he replied before carefully removing himself from her grip. In the background, Issei merely sighed before getting started on supper. Tamamo, I'm surprised you found us so quickly. And where is Suzuki? I thought she was with you when we split up. Oh, her? The fox girl asked offhandedly. I ditched her after we escaped. Be what? Issei demanded as he set fresh cups of tea down before them. Tamamo waved him off. Ah, she'll be fine, she said. She's a tough one. Besides, you pamper the others too much, master. You should pamper me instat. She took a sip of her tea and frowned. What's with this horrible tea? Issei scowled at her. It's all we can afford right now, especially after our party last night. Moo. The fox girl whined. You had a party without me? Wouldn't call it much of a party, Chachamaru remarked. These two idiots were making a big deal about Katsuden. Zero-chan. The puppet looked at her master, her expression deadpan. You may be my master, but you're still an idiot. She said bluntly. Honestly, 327.65. So what? We were in English class. The puppet snapped. Issei averted his eyes. Well, I wanted them to accept me without asking too many questions and drawing unwanted attention to myself, he said. So I may have cast a tiny hypnosis charm on them. Well, that backfired spectacularly, Chachamaru deadpanned. As the two continued to argue, Tamamo stood and poured her undrunk tea down the sink. Boy. Ashia growled. Don't waste our resources. The fox girl ignored him in favor of looking around the apartment with a frown on her face. Why are we living in such a tiny apartment? Oh, no. Chachamaru muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Our humble abode does not live up to the standards of the great Tamamo no Mae. Whatever shall we do? But of course. The legendary Kitsune sniffed. I was the courtesan of an emperor, you know. Cough glorified, whore cough. Zero-chan. Sorry. This is only a temporary base, the white-haired man spoke up, sensing the impending explosion. Until we can gather our resources, however, we're stuck here. In other words, until Suzuki gets here, we're screwed, Tamamo asked dryly. She sent a dangerous glare at Chachamaru as she said this. The puppet stuck her tongue out in response. Well, if somebody hadn't ditched her, Issei muttered, prompting the fox girl to cock her head innocently. He rose from his seat and made his way over to one of the kitchen drawers. He withdrew a large envelope from the drawer before returning to the kitatsu and handing it to the fox girl. These are your identification papers. We've enrolled you as a second-year student at Kuoh Academy. Tamamo took a look at her papers and frowned. Me no Tamamo. She huffed. Very creative. Lame Ashia. So, what's our source of income for the time being? Well, I'm working part-time at McDonald's. Ashia is working as a telephone operator at some small-time company. Issei paused, raising an eyebrow at the now giggling fox girl. What's so funny? I am sorry. Tamamo placed a hand over her mouth in an attempt to stifle the sound of her laughter. I'm just trying to picture you asking me, would you like fries with that? The brown-haired boy quickly grew irritated. You just wait. He snapped. I know for a fact that I'll be getting a promotion soon. That shall be my first step in climbing the corporate ladder and ruling this country. Master, you're doing it again, Chachamaru interrupted his maniacal laughter. Issei coughed. Thank you, Zero-chan. The puppet nodded. So, Tamamo said, as though her master hadn't gone into a hysterical fit just a few moments ago. I placed a few seals around town before coming here. Already, I've detected supernatural movement. Issei nodded. As I told you, we've already discerned that there are two pure-blooded devils living in this town. Both of which have several peerage members. Devils, huh? The fox yakai muttered, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. My seals informed me that there are several fallen angels moving throughout the city as well. The word around town is that the church on top of the hill was abandoned until recently, Issei-sama, Ashia supplied. Apparently, a strange priest moved in, and several other characters have been seen coming and going. The fallen are likely based there. Any angel presence? None so far, master. Issei nodded. Alright then, we'll continue to lay low and observe them, he said. Hopefully they remain neutral. I'd prefer to avoid having to deal with Azazel's nonsense. Just thinking of having to listen to him prattle on about sacred gears is giving me a headache. And what of the devils, Issei-sama? Ashia asked. Should we contact them? I'd prefer not to, but I believe they've already noticed me, Issei admitted. No kidding, those two girls were practically drooling over you, Chachamaru interjected snidely. Girls? Tamamo smirked. Ho, are you seducing more women, master? Aren't we, your beautiful and ever so willing servants enough to sate your lust? They were Ria's Gremory and Himejima Akeno, Issei said, ignoring the fox girl, much to her chagrin. Apparently they are quite popular among the student body. Gremory? Ashia asked in surprise. Of the 72 pillars. The very same brown-haired boy nodded. After some digging, I've discovered that the president of the school goes by the name Sona Shitori. I believe that is a pseudonym for her true name, Sona Citri. Those two are the heiresses of their respective families, Tamamo noted. And both are sisters of the current leaders of New Hell. Issei nodded once more. Indeed, he intoned as Ashiya placed their dinner before them. I did Akamasu. What the hell is this? The fox frowned, staring at the meal before them. Cucumbers dipped in honey. The brown-haired boy said enthusiastically. If you close your eyes and pinch your nose, it really does taste like watermelon. The legendary Kitsune closed her eyes and wept. Suzuki. She wailed. I'm sorry for ditching you. Please, get here soon. Ooh, I'm so hungry, Tamamo groaned as the two walked through the gates of Kuoh Academy the next day. She had transformed into her fully human form before leaving the apartment. This left herself with a normal pair of ears and rendered her tail less. Issei had to admit, she pulled off the uniform spectacularly with her slim figure, long legs and a sizable bust. Needless to say, she was drawing quite a bit of attention. Who's that beauty? Why is she walking with Haidu-kun? Don't tell me they're a couple. No. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Issei muttered. Tamamo giggled. Aw, what's the matter, master? She asked teasingly. Feeling shy. We're trying to avoid drawing too much attention to ourselves. Well, you already screwed yourself over on that part yesterday, Chachamaru whispered. She was once again perched atop his head. Face it, you're always going to draw attention to yourself no matter where you go. It's Murphy's Law. Issei merely sighed as they reached their class. He took his seat as the Kitsune spoke with the teacher. The brunette boy hoped that she could at least introduce herself in a normal fashion. Hello, everyone. She exclaimed with a wink. I'm Ino Tamamo and I'm Issei-kun's mistress. Of course not, Issei thought as chaos ensued. Issei let out a sigh as the school bell rang, signaling the start of lunch break. The brunette glanced up to see Tamamo being ushered out by a group of girls. He had tasked her this morning with gathering information on the devils of the school and would most likely use those girls to do so. Either that or establish her position as queen and supreme overlord of the school, or as Chachamaru described, attention whoring. He could never quite tell with her. Issei saw other students starting to approach him. They most likely wanted to know his relationship with Tamamo, so he quickly ducked out. He really didn't want to deal with them right now. He swiftly maneuvered his way through the hallways, trying to stay out of sight as much as possible. Eventually, he came across a meadow-like area near an older school building, away from the curious stares of his classmates. Heaving a small sigh of relief, he sat down under a large tree and opened the feast prepared by his loyal housekeeper, Ashiya. Tea on rice. Issei cheered as he spotted his pathetically meager meal. Ashiya, you've outdone yourself once again. Good grief, Chachamaru muttered from her place on his shoulder. As he devoured his meal, he noticed a commotion nearby. A glance over his shoulder revealed that the girls' kendo club was chasing down two boys, shinai in hand and violence in their eyes. He recognized the boys as Mitsuda and Motohama from his class. Even after only 2 days in school, he'd already heard of their reputation as hardcore perverts. Now, Issei himself was appreciative of the female body. Many of his own servants and acquaintances were quite beautiful in their own right. But those two boys could give Asmodeus a run for his money. Feeling mischievous, he subtly pointed at them with his right index finger. Both boys suddenly felt the ground shift beneath them, causing them both to land flat on their faces. Leaning back, the brunette boy watched with wry amusement as the kendo club pounced on the two unfortunate perverts. Master. Issei sighed. I know, Zero-chan. He looked up at the crimson-haired girl spying on him from the old school building and smiled wanly. He knows magic, Riaz exclaimed in surprise. He does? Akeno questioned. Strange, I can't sense anything out of the ordinary with him. Neither can I, the red-haired girl muttered as she moved away from the window. He must be concealing himself. And what do you intend to do with him? I'm still interested, she replied with a smirk. More so now, in fact. I'll have Kaneko tail him after school. And if he proves to be dangerous, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it, the redhead said offhandedly. I'm back, a male voice called out. They turned to see a handsome blonde-haired boy entering, bowing as he did. Udo, Riaz acknowledged. Welcome back. Kiba-kun, was there something you needed? The black-haired girl asked. You're usually with your human friends during lunch breaks. As a matter of fact, Udo nodded. I wish to discuss the fallen angels that have moved in recently. Riaz frowned. Ah, yes, there's that too, she muttered. I wonder. But you? I've noticed that the fallen angels have been watching a certain establishment, Riaz explained. The McDonald's in the shopping district. Unless I'm mistaken, I've seen Haidu Issei-kun working there. Do you think the fallen angels are after him, but you? Udo questioned. It's a possibility, the redhead nodded. Tell me, what do you two know of him so far? Only that he seems to be quite popular, Yudo admitted. After checking the school registry, with permission from Sonokaichu, of course. I've discovered that he's been attending school overseas, Akeno replied. After his parents passed away, he returned to Japan to live with a friend of the family, one Issei Shiru. And then there's the matter of that strange girl that transferred in this morning. Yudo frowned. Strange girl. He repeated. A new student transferred into class 2A, Rias rolled her eyes. She declared herself his mistress. Yudo winced. Well, perhaps that is strange, he admitted. But for all we know she could be telling the truth. Ria sighed. Perhaps, she allowed it. For now, we'll keep an eye on both of them. And the fallen angels, but you. I want to find out what they're after, the Redeet declared. I'd rather avoid a conflict, however. So, for the time being, we'll continue to observe them. Yudo nodded just as the bell rang, signaling the end of their lunch break. As you wish, but you, he turned towards the door. I'll be returning to class now. Oh, Yudo, Rias called. If you see Kaneko, be sure to remind her to come see me after school. Yes, but you, with that, the blonde made his exit. Only when the door fully closed behind him did he allow a fox-like grin to stretch across his face. You're not human, a white-haired girl accused as she stood in his path. Issei sighed. Tamamo had warned him that someone would be following him after school, but he hadn't been expecting this. And what makes you say that, Taoju-san? Thankfully, he had stuffed Chachamaru into his bag the moment he saw her approaching. You're hiding your aura using an unknown method, the girl replied warily. But I can still sense your kai, which is inhuman. In fact, you feel incredibly similar to a devil. Senjutsu? Issei asked in surprise. The girl, if possible, stiffened even more. I insist you come see Butchu, Kaneko said slowly. She looked ready to fight if he resisted. Issei sighed once more. Very well, lead the way. He conceded. Honestly, a few days and I've been discovered already. I'm losing my touch. When the girl began leading him away, he opened his bag. Chachamaru was glaring at him venomously. Sorry, Zero-chan, he mouthed the words. I'm going to be delayed, go and tell Issei. Don't worry. I can handle this. She looked ready to protest, but he silenced her with a glare. With great reluctance, she slipped out of his bag and into a nearby bush. Issei continued to follow the petite girl as she led him to the old school building. He had attempted to converse with the small girl, but she only responded with small terse statements. As they entered the building, he noticed that one of the doors had been sealed shut. A sign that read "Do not enter" hung from the doorknob. They eventually came to a stop in front of a different door on the second floor, and Kaneko announced their presence. But you, I've brought him, she called as she opened the door for him. Inside, 3 people turned to them in surprise. He recognized them as Ria's Gremory, Himejima Akeno and Kibayudo. So, this is her peerage. Haidu-san? Rias questioned. Kaneko, why did you bring him here? He's not human, but you, the white-haired girl explained. The 2 females looked surprised, but Kiba sported a strange expression. Is that so? The crimson-haired girl asked. And just what is he? He's a devil, but you. Iridide's eyes narrowed. Is that so? She asked quietly. She seemed disappointed. Well, Haidu-san, may I ask what is your purpose here at our prestigious academy? And why did you not inform me or Sona Citri before entering the city? To be honest. He shrugged as Akeno showed him to one of the couches. I wasn't even aware there were other devils in the city until just yesterday. I was more concerned with getting a promotion at McDonald's. Is that so? Ria's sweat dropped. And why exactly did you come here? No particular reason, he replied. My companions and I have been traveling the world for a while. Some of them originated from Japan, so I felt we should pay a visit. I see what she said. And I presume these companions are in fact your servants. He hesitated slightly before nodding. Not that any of them noticed his hesitation, of course. But, Rias did appear thoughtful. I've never heard the name Haidu before, though. I'm not affiliated with a clan, he explained. Nor have any of my deeds merited any special attention. Ah, you're an extra devil then, she nodded. And I assume the girl that transferred and declared herself your mistress this morning is one of your servants. Issei chuckled in embarrassment as the crimson-haired girl looked at him with amusement in her eyes. Sorry about that. He saw Kiba twitch in his peripheral vision. Rias looked at her servants, who simply shrugged in return. He seemed to be telling the truth. Very well then. So long as you don't intend to cause any trouble, I see no reason for us to come into conflict. She gave him a smile and in that moment, Issei realized why she was considered the most beautiful girl in the school. The crimson-haired beauty stood from her desk and walked around, offering her hand. Allow me to officially welcome you to Kuoh Academy, Haidu-san. Issei is fine, the brown-haired boy nodded as he shook her proffered hand. Very well, Issei-kun, she nodded. You. Whatever she was about to say was interrupted as a voice called out. "But you, I'm back." The room's occupants turned to see Kiba walking through the door. "Why you?" Rias exclaimed in shock as she looked between the two Kibas. "But..." Issei sighed loudly as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'm so sorry about this," he said, glaring at Kiba on the couch. Kiba allowed a smirk to cross his face before he was enveloped in a cloud of smoke. "Poof. Moo, people always have the worst timing," Tamamo complained. Who? "Once again, I'm sorry," Issei apologized. "This is Tamamo, my servant." "That's not possible." Kaneko suddenly snapped. She looked the most shocked out of everyone in the room. I couldn't sense her at all. She actually looked a bit frightened. "Yes, that's one of her many talents," Issei nodded. "She can completely disguise herself from almost all forms of sensory." Ria's eyes were narrowed in thought. "One would have to be very skilled in to hide themselves from another user," she muttered. Powerful shape-shifting Tamamo. She looked up at them in shock. She can't be." "You know your history well," the girl grinned as 9 majestic foxtails sprouted from her lower back. "Yes, my true name is Tamamo no Mei." Rias and her servants looked awed. "To think you have such a legendary person as your servant," the Redeed muttered as she looked at Issei in a new light. "You must be very powerful. Who exactly are you?" Issei shrugged. "I was just in the right place at the right time." "I see," she accepted his answer. "For now, at least. How many of your servants are currently in the city?" "Currently, only 2, Issei replied. "Tamamo is the only one here at school with me, as my other servant's chosen appearance is a little too old for high school. I suspect that several of my other servants will be arriving sometime within the next few weeks." "I see," Rias nodded as she took a seat on the couch opposite Issei. "Well, Issei-san, I'd like to extend an invitation for you to join the Occult Research Club." "Oh? Yes, the club is just a front," she explained. "I won't have any real power over you. We just use it as an excuse to get out of class if the need arises." "I see. Plus, I feel that cooperation between our groups would be beneficial, would it not?" she continued. "Being in the same club will provide an easy method of communication and..." "Alright, you've convinced me," Issei chuckled. "Very well, Gremory-san. We'll join your club." Rias beamed. "Well, I suppose introductions are in order." She stood from her seat. "I am Rias Gremory, of the Gremory House, and I am the king of this group." The crimson-haired girl allowed her aura to extend and wash over them, causing Issei to blink in surprise. She's already remarkably strong for her age, he thought. Though considering who her brother is, I'm not all that surprised. Rias waved her hand towards the ponytailed girl who was preparing tea. "This is Himejima Keno. She is my Quen. The black-haired girl placed his tea on the table and bowed to him. "I'm in your care, Issei-kun," she said with a serene smile. She truly looked like the definition of Yamato Nadeshiko, the perfect Japanese woman. "This is Kiba, my Knight. Kiba, who had looked confused for the majority of his time there, nodded to him with a smile akin to that of a prince. "Nice to meet you, Issei-kun. And this is Taoju Kaneko, my Rook. The stoic white-haired girl looked uncharacteristically nervous. She kept glancing at Tamamo out of the corner of her eye, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. "Nice to meet you," she nodded at him quietly. Issei took that as his cue to stand and introduce himself. "I am Haidu Issei, traveler." He smiled mischievously and released a fraction of his own aura. His aura actually caused the crimson-haired princess to stagger backwards in shock. The rest of her peerage also appeared floored. Had they been standing, they likely would have been brought to their knees. That's incredible," Rias muttered as she compassed herself. Meanwhile, her peerage continued to stare at him in mute shock. "That was your true strength." "Sorry about that," Issei chuckled. They simply smiled at him weakly. "And this is Mino Tamamo my, Bishop. I'm pleased to make your acquaintance," the fox girl said. She then performed an elegant bow that gave the Keno a run for her money in the title of Yamato Nadeshiko. "It's an honor to meet you as well, Tamamo-san." Rias practically had stars in her eyes, her earlier shock from Issei's aura forgotten. "Don't tell me she's one of those people obsessed about anything Japanese related." The Keno coughed delicately, causing Rias to snap out of her Japan-induced daze. "Alright, sorry," she said sheepishly. Anyway, I welcome you to our humble club, Issei-kun." "Thank you, Gremory-senpai." "Rias?" Issei smiled. "Very well, Rias-senpai. Well, today has certainly been productive," the red-haired girl smiled. "I'll have to introduce you to Sona soon. You mentioned you have another servant, but he's too old for high school." "All of us are too old for high school," Issei thought wryly. "Indeed. I'll talk to Sona tonight about getting him a teaching position at the school," she offered. "I'd imagine you'd like your servants close at hand." "That would be very helpful, thank you," Issei bowed to her. "I suppose I'll see you tomorrow then, senpai." Until tomorrow, Issei-kun, Rias called as he and Tamamo took their leave. As the door closed behind them, Akeno turned towards their leader. "What do you think of this development, Butchu?" she asked curiously. "I'm a little disappointed that I can't make him a part of my peerage," she replied. "However, this isn't exactly an unpleasant development. He's powerful. He has to have the Tamamo no Mei in his peerage. With the sudden increase of fallen angel activity, it'll be nice to have him on our side." "The fallen were watching his workplace, weren't they?" Kiba piped in. "Do you think they know he's a devil?" "I doubt it," Rias shook her head. "He's good at hiding his power. We only found out he's a devil because of Kaneko. No, they must be after something else." "But what?" "Perhaps Issei-kun knows something about it," Akeno suggested. "I hope so," she smiled slightly. "Ara, you seem happy, but you?" Rias flushed slightly. "Well, I find him interesting," she said quickly. "And you can't deny you feel the same way, Akeno." Ifufu, she placed a hand to her cheek as they became rosy. "I admit, when he unleashed his aura, I felt hot all over. It was so dominating. I think I'm jealous of Tamamo Dono. If she's his bishop, I shudder to think who his quen is," Rias muttered. "I wouldn't be surprised if his entire peerage consisted of monsters," Kiba added his 2 cents. He smiled. "I look forward to meeting them." "As do I," Rias nodded. She looked towards her Rook who had been quieter than usual. "Kaneko, are you okay?" The white-haired girl jumped slightly at being called out. "I'm fine, but you?" "It's Tamamo-san, isn't it?" Kaneko nodded hesitantly. "Do you fear her?" Another hesitant nod and Rias sighed. "Ara, perhaps she can help you," Akeno said comfortingly. "She's a legendary spirit with lots of experience. I'm certain she can teach you if you ask her nicely. "There's no need to rush, Kaneko," Rias added sympathetically. "Take as much time as you need." Kaneko merely nodded as she gazed at the door in which Issei and Tamamo had left from. "We're home," Issei called out as he and Tamamo stepped through the threshold. The sound of frantic footfalls was his only warning before he was suddenly pulled inside. "Issei-sama!" Ashiya shouted hysterically. "Are you okay? Did they touch you in inappropriate places? Is your purity intact?" "I'm not exactly a virgin, Ashiya," Issei growled before realizing just what his servant was saying. "Wait, what did Chachamaru tell you?" "She said you'd been accosted by sexual deviants." The white-haired man shrieked, still in hysterics. "She said that they'd caught you while your guard was down and that the lewd no-good fox was just egging them on. She said that you ordered her to save herself with the very last of your strength." He let out a growl. "I was going to go save you, but I couldn't find my demon general cape." "Wait, you mean the reason you didn't save me was because you couldn't find your cape?" Issei roared. "Master, I think you're missing the point," Tamamo began. "I'm sorry, Issei-sama." Ashiya cried, groveling before him, tears running down his face. "Damn it, Ashiya. You're supposed to be my right hand." "I'm sorry. Master. How am I supposed to rely on you?" "I'm sorry. Master. And another thing. Master." "What?" "You know what? Never mind." The poor girl really did look exhausted. "I'm tired. Wake me up when dinner's ready." From her perch on the kitchen counter, Chachamaru surveyed her handiwork with a wicked smirk. "Just another day in the life. Please go out with me." A black-haired girl cried out, bowing low as she awaited his reply. The girl in question was wearing a different uniform from his own. It consisted of a red jacket with a letter P embroidered upon her breast pocket, a white undershirt with a red bow and a green skirt. Her dainty hands cradled her handbag as her violet eyes looked up at him nervously. "Well, this is unexpected," Issei thought, resisting the urge to heave a world-weary sigh. The girl was a fallen angel, he could tell that much. But what did she want from him? "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The girl seemed to flush in embarrassment. Sorry," she stuttered. "My name is Amano Yuma. It's just I've watched you walking by a few times already, but I've only just managed to gather the courage to ask you out. You're not seeing anyone, are you?" "Well, no," he said cautiously. "Well, her story technically checks out." He had noticed her watching him walk home from school and at work. However, he was certain that he'd kept his aura hidden at all times, the time with Rias and her peerage a few days ago being the sole exception. But he'd made sure to cover his tracks on that occasion as well. He was somewhat glad that Chachamaru was still somewhat upset with him and was currently at home. Most likely tormenting Ashiya. "That's great." The girl's face lit up. "So will you?" "Well, let's take a look at the pros and cons," he mused. Pros? He would be spending time with an attractive, gorgeous girl. He'd always had a thing for angel girls, fallen or otherwise. In fact, his past relationship with a certain archangel could be considered the stuff of legend. He could also use this to discover the fallen angel's motives here in the city and why they were watching him in particular. There were also the girl's own feelings to consider. It was hardly uncommon for a fallen angel to become infatuated with a human. In fact, having explicit relations with humans was the most common reason that angels fell. Neither was it unheard of, though still rare, for a fallen angel and a devil to be intimate. In fact, Azazel had informed him some time ago that Shemazai married a devil woman. The eccentric governor-general had expressed his hope that it would lead to further peace between the factions. But he was digressing. Cons. He knew for a fact that several females would give him sheer hell for getting a girlfriend. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, after all. And knowing a certain fox's skills with, he held no doubt that she would exact terrible vengeance on him. There was also a high likelihood that this was all just a ploy of some kind, one that would no doubt end unpleasantly for both of them. As he watched her fidget, Issei realized that he'd been staring at her with a severe expression for several minutes now. He was about to answer when he suddenly remembered something Azazel had brought up during their last meeting. A new organization has been moving in the shadows, the governor informed him solemnly, as they shared a bottle of brandy. I fear they plan to disrupt the tentative ceasefire that we've established. They call themselves the Cows Brigade. And that's not the worst of it. I fear that I may have a traitor among my own organization. What makes you say that? Issei questioned, pouring himself another glass. Groups of fallen angels have begun behaving erratically, the former angel sighed. You know of my interest in sacred gears, no? Well, I asked my fellow Gregory to help by monitoring sacred gear users, but these users are starting to disappear. You mean they're killing them? Some of them have turned up dead, yes, Azazel admitted, taking another swig of his drink. The fallen angels responsible claimed that it was in self-defense, but you can understand my doubts. Most of the sacred gear users just up and vanish. That is suspicious, Issei murmured before downing his drink and standing. I'll contact you if I discover anything. Shaking himself out of his little reverie, the brown-haired boy smiled slightly. Sure, I'd love to, he said finally. I can only hope Tamamo will understand my reasoning. The girl, Yuma, he reminded himself, smiled brightly. Really? She let out a sigh of relief. That's great. Here's my number, call me. After writing her contact information on a slip of paper, she handed it to him with a beaming smile. I hope I'll see you soon, Ice-kun. With a quick bow she ran off in the opposite direction he was headed. Issei simply watched her disappear around the corner. Indeed, Yuma-san. Well, a smug voice called from behind him, making his eyes widen. He recognized that voice. Seducing schoolgirls now? I thought you were better than that, master. Spinning around, he spotted a blonde-haired girl leaning against a nearby lamppost. The girl wore her hair in a messy ponytail with locks of hair framing either side of her face. She was short, with him being a full head taller than her. She wore a white tube top with blue trim that left the majority of her midriff exposed, giving him a good look at her perfectly toned stomach. Slung casually over her shoulder was a bright red leather jacket. The only thing protecting her lower body from exposure were a tiny pair of Daisy Dukes. She accessorized with a thick black belt with silver studding. Completing the ensemble was a pair of black combat boots studded with silver skulls. But her most striking feature, in his opinion, were her bright forest green eyes. They glared at him with a fierce intensity rarely seen in today's youth. She was hardly a simple schoolgirl, Mordred, Issei answered her. You should have been able to tell what she is. She wasn't even attempting to disguise it. The blonde rolled her eyes. I was teasing, she grumbled. Lighten up, will ya? When did you arrive? Issei asked as he approached her. I arrived in Japan a few days ago, she replied offhandedly. I decided to take the scenic route, though. Hope you don't mind. There's not exactly anything I can do about it at this point, the brunette quipped. His ears perked up however, when he heard the sound of motorcycles approaching them. Within moments, the two were surrounded by what appeared to be a gang of delinquent bikers. Issei tensed as he gazed at them warily. There had to be at least a dozen of them, and each of the gangsters was glaring at him menacingly. What's going on here? Issei muttered. Then, to his utter shock, one of them spoke up, Yo, is this guy giving you trouble? Mordred waved them off. Nah, he's cool. You sure? He asked again, still glaring at Issei. The blonde girl, who couldn't be any taller than 5'2", sent a menacing glare at him. I said. He's with me, got it? She snapped. The poor man nearly wet himself as he nodded. If I find any of you messing with him, you deal with me, Capus. Yes, the blonde girl nodded. Alright, make yourselves scarce. She ordered. I don't want any of you bothering me. If I need you, I'll come get you. Now, scram. Issei watched numbly as the biker gang drove off, the sounds of their motorcycles disappearing in the distance. Mordred, Iwa. The blonde-haired girl threw him a grin. That gang confronted me right after I left the Tokyo airport. Mordred explained as she began walking away, beckoning him to follow her. They thought I was a helpless little foreign girl and tried to intimidate me into coming with them. As the girl spoke, she led him around the corner where a sleek red and black motorcycle sat waiting. The nearby pedestrians seemed to avoid walking near the bike and began walking faster as they spotted Mordred. Of course, I wasn't going to have any of that, the blonde continued. So, I beat the shit out of them. You should have been there. It was glorious. She slipped her red jacket on and donned a pair of dark sunglasses. They were so moved by my sheer superiority that they dubbed me their new leader. Issei felt like face-palming, so he did. Mordred Pendragon, heir to the throne of Camelot and Knight of the Round Table. Leader of a motorcycle gang. He heaved a world-weary sigh. Why does this not surprise me? The girl merely shrugged before swinging a leg over her mighty steed and revving the engine. Hop on, master, she urged. Just tell me where to go. He did so with another sigh. He was too tired to argue with her. He could only hope Tamamo would take the news about Yuma well. You what? God damn it. I said. I agreed to be her boyfriend, Issei said tiredly as he, Tamamo, Mordred and Ashia sat around the kotatsu with their tea. Chachamaru sat on the kitchen counter, getting her kicks from their argument. Then just why would you do that? The fox girl demanded, crossing her arms. Issei tried to ignore the way her breasts heaved. He failed, much to her delight. She remained peeved at him, however. Mordred glanced down at her own cup and scowled, which she promptly hid by taking a sip of her tea. Rubbing his temples, Issei replied wearily. I told you all about this new organization called the Cows Brigade, right? At their nods, he continued. Well, their actions so far have not been in favor of maintaining peace between the factions. According to Azazel, members of the Gremory have begun behaving strangely. Sacred gear users are vanishing, and he fears there may be a traitor among his organization that is responsible. And you intend to use this fallen angel girl to try and glean information on who this traitor is, Ashia deduced. Issei nodded. It's very likely that the lower-ranking fallen are simply pawns being used by a higher power, he explained. If I can get a name, Azazel can handle the rest. Ah, Tamamo whined. Fine. But you have to take me out on a date after you're done. I believe I'm entitled to it, considering that I've been unfailingly loyal. Not to mention utterly adorable. I'll see what I can do, Issei sighed. An evil glint entered the fox girl's eyes. Ah, but if you don't, terrible things shall await you, she whispered ominously. Though, I suppose it would be rather inconvenient for you to fall down a flight of stairs and break both your legs, so that's out. Waking up in the morning as a potato bug would be fitting, but that's way too gross, so that's out, too. Issei could feel a cold chill riding up his spine as she spoke. Ah, but nothing screams divine punishment quite like dysentery caused by eating moldy bread. That would be a good plan, Ashia nodded. If we could afford bread. Immediately, Tamamo went from vengeful to depressed, as Ashia reminded her of their financial status. Moo, she cried, wiping her eyes and turning to the blonde knight sitting across from her. Would it have to be you that showed up? Why couldn't it have been Suzuki? Mordred gave her a harsh glare. You got a problem with me? She growled. The ho-ho, if it weren't for you, I could be living in the lap of luxury, little girl. Bounce. If possible, Mordred's glare intensified. You? Issei sighed. Ashia. The white-haired man nodded before walking over and smacking their heads against each other. Ow. The two girls cried, looking up at him with tears in their eyes. Enough bickering. He snapped. You're troubling Issei-sama. Ah, before I forget, Mordred, Issei stood and walked over to one of the kitchen drawers. He withdrew the appropriate identification papers and handed them to the blonde girl. You'll be attending Kuoh Academy with us tomorrow. I've already arranged a uniform in your size. The knight frowned as she looked over her new ID. Molly Knight. She sneered. Lame Ashia, Issei and Tamamo replied in unison. Boy. Wait a minute, Mordred's eyes widened as she glanced at Tamamo, who was still clad in her uniform. You mean I have to wear that? Is something wrong? It's so perverted. The others looked at her as though she were insane. Mordred, Issei said irritably. You're wearing even less than that right now. But look at it. Aw, the little girl is afraid of skirts, Tamamo giggled. She did a little twirl, giving a tantalizing look at her panties. They were black, with lace. It's fine, we can probably get you a boy's uniform. The blonde girl nodded in satisfaction. Good, aye. Besides, the fox girl cooed. I'd rather have Master's attention all to myself. Mordred froze. Master loves this uniform, right? Don't you think Tamamo looks adorable? Issei coughed nervously as the fox girl sauntered over to him, her hips swaying in a hypnotic manner. Her ears suddenly propped up and a single tail burst out from her lower back. The tail emerged from beneath her skirt, causing it to hike up dangerously. The appendage wrapped itself around his wrist, preventing escape. Beard. Tamamo hummed as she slowly wrapped her arms around Issei's neck. Did you say something to the little girl? I'll wear it. Oh, master. I said I'll wear it. I'll wear it. The blonde girl finally shouted, her face turning red. Whether from anger or embarrassment, Issei was unsure. Get off of him. I don't think I will. Tamamo giggled before tilting her head up and kissing him deeply. Behind her, Mordred began shaking as she slowly lowered her head until her bangs shadowed her eyes. Master, she began, as something began taking shape in her right hand. Which would you prefer? A fox fur coat or a hat? With a shriek of rage, the blonde tightened her grip on the fully formed sword and leapt at the fox girl. Tamamo immediately summoned a magic circle in retaliation. In her corner, Chachamaru watched the escalating fight and laughed with psychotic glee. Hello, Mordred said with a stiff bow. The name's Molly Knight. I'm from England. I would say please take care of me, but I don't give a damn about any of you. Just stay out of my way and we'll get along fine. Issei sat at his desk, smiling tiredly as the murmurs began. Hey, she's pretty cute. What an attitude though. Are all foreigners like that? No way, Ria's one-sama is nowhere near like that. The teacher instructed the blonde girl to sit near the front of the class and was duly ignored. She swaggered over to the desk beside Issei and plopped down. Her eyes dared, no, begged him to refute her. The teacher looked ready to do just that, but froze as his eyes suddenly glazed over. Issei glanced at Tamamo sitting behind him and saw the fox girl muttering under her breath. She was subtly pointing her index finger at the now hypnotized instructor. Mordred growled in irritation before crossing her arms and gazing out the window. The blonde knight had been tense ever since she'd donned her new uniform this morning. She'd probably been eager for a fight even if it was only with a normal human. He sent a silent thanks to Tamamo. It seems she has calmed down since yesterday. At least, she was calm enough to understand that Mordred picking a fight with the teacher would be a bad thing. After breaking up last night's catfight, he'd received a call from Yuma, the fallen angel girl. They spoke for a while before she proposed that she walk him to school tomorrow. He'd agreed and told his servants as much. The rest of the evening was spent in an uncomfortable silence since Tamamo refused to speak to him. Later that same evening he'd walked outside to see the fox girl practicing random karate katas in the front yard. First, strike the crotch. Next, really strike the crotch. Repentance through crotch violence. Needless to say, he wasted no time retreating inside and barricading himself in the bathroom. Issei was broken out of his musing by the teacher asking Mordred a question, to which the blonde answered with a smartass reply. He sighed as he heard Tamamo muttering behind him. It was going to be a long day. Perhaps it hadn't been too bad, Issei mused. It seemed Rias had gotten Sona to agree to getting Shia hired. An hour or so after the start of classes, the white-haired man had walked in, claiming to be their new math teacher for the rest of the year. Thankfully, he'd ignored them for the majority of class, giving Mordred enough time to cool off and relax. It was after school now and the three students were on their way to the Occult Research Club room to introduce Mordred to their newfound allies. Issei was currently at a staff meeting in order to get to know his new co-workers, but he would be joining them later. We're here. Issei called out as they stepped inside. The other club members were already there. They seemed to have been waiting for him. Ah, Issei-kun, Rias greeted him. Just the person I wish to speak to. She glanced at the blonde girl beside him. I see you've brought someone else with you. I presume she is another of your servants. Yes, Issei nodded. This is Molly Knight. She hails from England. She is my, Knight. He finished sheepishly. The crimson-haired beauty arched a single delicate eyebrow. Molly Knight, the Knight, she questioned, her eyes sparkled with amusement. I assume that is not her true name. Indeed it's not, Princess, Mordred said dryly. Believe me, I'd change it, but there'd be way too much bullshit involved. Rias raised another eyebrow at her choice of words. While the others looked shocked that such a tiny, delicate-looking girl would speak in such a way. Looks truly could be deceiving. I see, the Redeed nodded. And may I ask what your true name is? Her peerage leaned in, eager to know the girl's true identity. After learning of Tamamo, they'd assumed that most of Issei's servants would be well-known figures. They were correct in that respect, however. And just why should I tell you? Issei sighed as Rias looked startled. Well, Mordred-chan, be polite, Tamamo chided. She smiled innocently as the blonde sent her an annoyed glare. We're guests here, after all. Ria's eyes widened in shock. Or it can't why you don't mean. The blonde drew herself to her full, unimpressive height. Yes, I am Mordred Pendragon, son of King Arthur and Knight of the Round Table. Even though she had to look down to meet the blonde's eyes, Rias still felt tiny in the presence of the legendary knight. Unbelievably the Redeed muttered as she stared at Issei intently. Tamamo no May, the nine-tailed fox and Mordred Pendragon, the knight of treachery who's next? Achilles. Heracles. Issei chuckled sheepishly. No one that grand, I assure you. He held his hands up in surrender as both his servants suddenly scowled at him. No offense, girls. Akeno began, a confused smile on her face. I was under the impression that Mordred was male. The legends got more than my gender incorrect, the blonde girl grunted. Oh? Kiba asked curiously. What do you mean? Issei smiled. Let's just say that Uther never had any sons. It took several moments for those words to sink in. Riaz was the first to realize what he meant. Why you mean that Arthur Pendragon, the once and future king was actually Arturia Pendragon, he nodded. She was forced to hide her true gender because having a woman on the throne would have been unacceptable during her time. You see, Riaz said, regaining her composure. Moving on. Issei-kun, there's something I'd like to speak with you about. Oh? Yes, she continued. Kaneko told me that you were walking to school with a fallen angel this morning. I'm curious about why. Issei sighed before gazing at her seriously. Alright, senpai, I'm entrusting you with quite a bit of information. I trust you'll keep what I'm about to tell you to yourself. At her hesitant nod, he continued. Azazel, the Governor General, is losing control over his subordinates. Excuse me? Was her shocked reply. You heard me, Issei nodded. There is a new organization that has emerged sometime within the last few years. They've taken to calling themselves the Cows Brigade. Their leader is currently unknown, but they've still made quite a following. The good governor believes that one of his Gregory have sided with them, Tamamo continued. Groups of fallen angels have been going rogue. Azazel has asked us to help determine who this traitor is. You're working with the fallen angels? Riaz asked, eyes narrowing. Tell me, princess. Mordred interjected, her green eyes glinting fiercely. Do you want to go to war? What? Of course not. Because that's exactly what's going to happen if Azazel gets usurped. The blonde knight growled. Perhaps not exactly, Issei admitted. But the possibility is too high for us to ignore. I see, the crimson-haired girl seemed to deflate under their intense gazes. And what do you intend to do with this girl? Well, my hope is to earn her trust and have her slip information, knowingly or otherwise, he explained. But I'm already suspicious of her actions. You know that they've been watching my workplace, correct? Of course. Azazel explained that the rogue angels have been kidnapping sacred gear users. Ara, that certainly can't be good, Akeno muttered. Mordred snorted. You think? Indeed, Tamamo nodded. And at worst, they've turned up dead. This was the first time many of them had ever seen her look so serious. And knowing this, we can deduce that someone working at McDonald's possesses a sacred gear. When I first noticed that they were watching, I had one of my servants cast a tracking spell on my co-workers. Issei explained. He paused for a moment. As a matter of fact, here he is now. As he said this, the door opened and a white-haired man stepped in. Pardon the intrusion. Ashiya said with a polite bow. Issei stood. This is Ashiya Shiru, my right hand. He said with a smile. He's been with me since the beginning and is my most loyal and powerful servant. His most powerful. So, this is his Quen then. Riaz thought as she stood to meet him. Ah, Ashiya-sensei, the crimson-haired girl said as she and her peerage bowed to him in respect. I hope you found the school to your liking. Yes, the campus is beautiful. Ashiya nodded. I believe you were discussing the fallen, Issei-sama. Ah, yes, as I was saying, Issei continued. I had Ashiya cast a tracking charm on my co-workers. Then, when Tamamo arrived, I asked her to weave her own enchantments that would allow us to know if, when and where they encountered a fallen angel. So far, our master is the only person that they have approached, Tamamo reported. And when I parted ways with Yuma-san this morning, I sent Chachamaru to tail her, Issei added. The silence that followed was suffocating. Issei-sama, Ashiya questioned nervously. Was that such a good idea? I almost feel sorry for those people, Mordred muttered as she kicked her legs up on the table. Almost. May their God have mercy on them, for she shall not, Tamamo murmured, before flinching from the prayer. Oh, come on, guys, Issei complained. You can't honestly say, he quieted as they simply stared at him with looks of pity. Oh, God. I condemned them to death, didn't I? Just what are you all talking about? Riaz demanded. Chachamaru, she's my familiar, he explained, his voice tired. She's a little bloodthirsty. His servants all snorted. A little. Issei just sighed once again. I'd better call her back. Issei stood and placed one hand on top of the other, palms facing downward. On the tabletop, a complex magic circle appeared in a shower of blue light. Thankfully, the room was charmed to conceal all supernatural activity from the outside world. Ria's brow furrowed in thought as she stared at Issei's circle. She'd never seen that crest before. It seemed to depict a ram's skull. She was broken out of her musing as something small began to take shape. Finally, the circle's light died down. The image they saw would forever be burned in their memories. A green-haired doll resembling a marionette appeared before them. In her right hand was a meat cleaver the size of Kaneko's head, and in her left hand was a dagger bigger than her torso. Her entire body was covered in blood and was pointedly dripping all over the table. It was obviously not hers. But the most disturbing image were her eyes, for they lacked all emotion save sheer psychotic glee. Her tiny mouth was stretched into a shit-eating grin as she stared them all down. "Aw, fun time is over already?" the puppet asked in disappointment. Whatever. I was done anyway." She took both knives and stabbed them into the table with a disturbing clunk. Issei sighed tiredly. "Why? Why not?" she shrugged in reply. "Don't worry, your angel girlfriend is still alive. Can't say the same for all those exorcists under the church though. Must have been 20 of them, at least." "Well, I suppose it could have been worse," she acknowledged. Riaz and her peerage looked at him as though he were insane. Issei rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Did anyone see you?" he questioned. "If they did, I guarantee they're not alive," the puppet answered as Issei cast a cleaning spell on her. She didn't bother to acknowledge him. "I followed the angel girl into the church and saw her meet with 3 other angels and a weird exorcist. The angels took off while the exorcist went down a hidden staircase underneath the altar." "And this is where you killed all the exorcists?" Mordred questioned. Apparently Riaz and the others were still trying to get over the fact that they were conversing with a psychotic, mass-murdering, killer puppet. "Yup," she nodded. "The weird exorcist that was talking to the angels was checking out some kind of sacrificial altar. He kept mumbling about a nun from Europe while giggling to himself. He was my kinda guy, really, so I let him leave before I killed all his friends." The puppet looked up at Riaz, who was still gaping at her in shock. "Is she okay?" Issei snapped his fingers in the girl's face, startling her. "Oh, hello, I'm Riaz Gremory, nice to meet you." "Oh, I know all about you," Chachamaru said offhandedly. "I've followed you home a few times. To make sure you weren't a threat." Riaz went pale and swallowed nervously. Issei couldn't blame her. Knowing that you've been stalked by a serial killer was nerve-wracking to say the least. "Well," he said, trying to break the tension. "I think that we've had enough excitement for one day." He stood along with the rest of his servants and bowed politely. "Please don't be nervous about Chachamaru. I guarantee your safety from her." He glared at the puppet as she jumped onto his shoulder. "Right." She rolled her eyes and huffed. Yeah. Issei sighed but nodded. "We'll see you tomorrow, Riaz-senpai." Goodbye, Issei-kun," Riaz stammered as Issei summoned a transportation circle and the group of 5 teleported home. "Issei-sama, something dire has come to my attention," Issei announced as their group met at the Katatsu. His face was set into a severe frown as he stared at them. "What is it, Issei?" Issei asked. "Have the fallen made a move?" "Strange, my seals haven't noticed anything," Tamamo mused. "Whose ass are we kicking?" Mordred demanded, slamming a fist onto the table. "No, it is something far worse, I'm afraid," the white-haired man said, his voice grave. "I'm afraid that we've run out of food." "Is that all, Issei?" Issei demanded. "I'm sure we'll survive." Issei suddenly stood and stormed over to the fridge, throwing it open. "Then please explain, Issei-sama," he said bluntly. "How is it you intend to hold out until our next paycheck on nothing but konjac jelly, cucumbers and milk?" The brown-haired boy deflated under his lieutenant's ire. "Well, it's not like we're completely broke, right?" he asked weakly. "I've still got some money left in my wallet and I could always just grab some leftovers from work." Everyone glanced at the corner where 2 large trash bags full of hamburger wrappers sat, as though mocking them. "We're gonna die, aren't we?" Tamamo wailed. "Do you intend to live on hamburgers and fries until then?" Issei demanded, a vein popping on his forehead. "What is this supersize me? All that high-calorie, high-cholesterol food while you're young? I look forward to seeing you 10 years from now. I just hope your lifestyle doesn't kill you before then. I'm sorry for my incompetence, but you're the one who said we should swallow our pride until." "Okay, I get it," Issei cried, leaping out of his seat. "I'll figure something out. So, get off my back." With that said, he stormed out of the apartment. As the door closed behind him, he let out a sigh and began walking in an attempt to clear his head. There was just too much going on. What with the fallen angels, school, work and dealing with Ria's group. True, Issei had a more stable job now, but teachers didn't make much either, especially with 4 mouths to feed. Ugh, with Tamamo and Mordred, it was like having kids. "Did Aisha and I just have our first fight?" He shuddered at the thought and ignored the sudden urge to buy the white-haired man flowers in apology. He couldn't afford them anyway. He passed by a restaurant and saw an older woman shrieking at a teenage girl about some debt. Poor girl, he thought. As he got closer, however, he realized something. Wait, I know her. Walking over, he got a good look at her. Though she was kneeling in Caesar position, he could tell she was short, a little shorter than Mordred. Whereas the blonde girl was lean and willowy, this girl sturdily built. She had powerful, toned arms and legs that spoke of years of training. The girl had dark fuchsia-colored hair and dark pink eyes, accentuated by black Egyptian-esque mascara. Her hair fell to her shoulders and was partially tied into a ponytail on the left side of her head. Her attire consisted of a short, simple off-white dress. She was barefoot, with only a pair of black leg wraps and a beautiful gold anklet covering her legs. On her wrists was a pair of intricate silver arm guards depicting a bird. Although a little dirty, she looked like a normal, attractive high school girl. He knew better, of course. "Hey," he called as he approached the one-sided argument. The woman turned and sneered at him. "Oh ho, are you the guardian this girl spoke of?" she demanded. Issei raised an eyebrow at the girl in question, who didn't look at him. "Indeed," he said after a while. "My name is Issei. May I ask why you are screaming at her?" "She had the gall to eat here and leave without paying," the woman shouted. Issei sighed before rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'm sorry," the brown-haired boy offered before taking out his wallet. "How much does she owe you?" The woman replied by showing him the receipt. "DT 10,000 yen," Issei shrieked. He looked up at the restaurant. It wasn't that fancy. "How much did you eat?" he demanded. The girl flinched and looked away. "Well?" the woman demanded. Issei swallowed. "I am sorry, I can't afford that." He bowed to her. The woman sneered at him once again. "Why am I not surprised?" she growled. She glared down at the still kneeling girl before her. "Well, I can't let you just leave, can I?" Her eyes roamed over the girl's arm guards. "Well, those bracelets of yours certainly look nice. Perhaps I should take those as payment." The girl flinched, rubbing the ornaments nervously. The woman then spotted the gold anklet the girl wore. "Oh, that's a nice piece of jewelry you've got there." The girl, who had remained silent until now, suddenly let out a squeak of fear. She looked up at the woman. No, she looked up at Issei, her pink eyes pleading with him. The brown-haired boy sighed. He certainly knew why it was so important to her. He had been the one to give it to her, after all. The teenage boy sighed as he watched the sun slowly rise over the small desert village. He glanced behind him to see Alciel still asleep on the cot. "I wonder how long it will be before my power returns completely," the former Demon King mused. He had modified his appearance somewhat. While he still possessed his forever messy hair, it was now brown in color. His eyes were also a dull brown. He had also modified his age, now in his late teens. He glanced at Alciel once more before deciding to head out for a stroll. "I can feel some of my power returning," he thought. "But nowhere near the power I once wielded. I'd wager I'm still around a strong low-class devil in terms of strength at the moment." He was broken out of his musing by the sound of heavy breathing and frantic footfalls. He quickly ducked behind a wooden stall that some merchant or other left behind. Once hidden, he glanced out to see a small, red-haired girl running as though her life depended on it. Well, running wasn't the proper word, she appeared to be stumbling about, more than anything. Curious, he glanced at her legs. Iron shackles. She was a slave. Suddenly a black-haired boy came barreling around the corner, a torch in one hand and a scimitar in the other. The girl shrieked as the boy grabbed a fistful of her hair and threw her to the ground. "Did you really think you could escape?" The boy sneered as he placed the scimitar at the girl's throat. "Remember this, girl, you belong to me. You're a slave. You always will be, understand?" "Please," the girl cried. "Someone help." The boy burst out laughing. "No one's going to save you." He cackled. "Even if someone were here, they couldn't do a damn thing about it. You're a slave. You have no rights. You're my possession. An object." "That's not true," the girl whimpered. The boy spat in her face. He stood and kicked her in the ribs. The girl shrieked in pain as he continued his assault. "You understand now? No one cares." "Excuse me," a voice called out. "But I care. I'd appreciate it if you stopped now." The boy stopped and looked at the person who'd interrupted him. "Who the hell are you?" He hefted his sword at him. "Listen here, this girl is my slave. I have every right to do whatever the hell I want with her." He looked down and kicked the girl again for emphasis. The Demon King glanced at the sword and scoffed. "Not anymore, because you're going to forget this girl ever existed. You're going to go home and have a nervous breakdown from the guilt of mistreating your slaves." The boy looked at him, ready to retort, but his eyes suddenly glazed over as an overwhelming presence invaded his weak mind. Drooling slightly, the boy wandered off, leaving the devil alone with the girl. What did you do to him?" the girl asked, wincing from the pain. The devil kneeled next to her and lifted her into his arms. "Just a little magic trick," he winked at her. He began walking off towards the ritzier part of town. "Where are you taking me?" The boy didn't answer as they eventually came upon a large fancy building. He walked up to the door and barged in. The fat man sitting at a desk with a large pitcher of wine in front of him glanced up at the intruders. "Who the hell are you?" the fat man demanded. He glanced at the girl in his arms. "Isn't that Jamal's slave?" "Not anymore," the devil said. He reached into his pocket and tossed a large sack of gold coins onto the desk. "I'm purchasing her freedom, good lord." He smiled down at the now wide-eyed girl. He left the fat lord to swoon over the amount of gold he'd just received. The sun was finally up in the sky, and the town was coming to life once again. He spotted a jewelry merchant setting up shop nearby and walked over. Spotting a particularly intricate piece, he purchased it and carried the girl to a secluded alleyway. Gingerly lowering the girl to the ground, he kneeled before her and muttered a small spell. The shackles binding her legs shattered. The red-haired girl looked at her now unbound ankles in awe. She watched silently as the boy who had set her free gently rubbed the sores left by the shackles. Delicately, he clipped the beautiful anklet he'd bought in its place. "You're free now," he said softly, smiling at her. "Those shackles weren't suited for someone as beautiful as you. This is much more appropriate, don't you think?" The girl flushed in embarrassment. She lifted her left leg and examined the anklet as it gleamed in the early morning sunlight. "And you are beautiful," he continued, placing a hand on her head. "A very beautiful person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl felt her eyes sting, and the image of her savior began to blur. Desperate to keep him in sight, terrified that this was all just a cruel dream, she furiously rubbed the tears from her eyes. "It's okay to cry," the boy said softly. "Tell me, what's your name?" The girl sniffed, still rubbing her eyes. "I'm Morgiana." The boy smiled warmly. "Well, Morgiana," he said, helping her to her feet. "I'll take care of you from now on. So don't you worry, okay?" Morgiana looked up at him, and for the first time since being sold into slavery. She smiled. Issei smiled slightly before bowing at the woman once more. "I'm deeply sorry," he said. "Perhaps I could work her department off. I'd be more than happy to wash dishes or do some heavy lifting." The woman glanced at him and Morgiana at his feet before grunting. "Fine. Walk around to the back. I don't want you disturbing customers, got it?" The woman walked back inside. Issei looked down at the girl and helped her to her feet. "See? No sweat. Master, I apologize for this inconvenience." The girl immediately got back on the ground and groveled before him. "I will accept any punishment you deem appropriate." Issei sighed as people passing by began to stare at them. "Stop, Morgiana," he said, lifting her once again. "Ugh, and to think you used to be so cute too, running around screaming big brother, big brother. Whatever happened to that?" The red-haired girl flushed in embarrassment. "I just felt that it was inappropriate as I grew older." Issei smiled and patted her head gently. "You'll always be my little sister, Morg." Morgiana suddenly pouted at him and stomped her foot on the ground. The impact caused a small crater to form. The brown-haired boy immediately backed off. Why was she suddenly angry? "Anyway, Issei-sama." She seemed to stress his name for some reason. "We'd better get to the kitchen before the manager becomes even angrier." Her master sighed before following. Issei sighed once again as he led the way home. After a few hours, they'd finally managed to pay off Morgiana's food bill. He'd had one hell of a time trying to explain how the tiny girl was able to lift entire piles of crates by herself. "We're back," he called out as they entered the apartment. "We?" Issei asked in confusion before he spotted the red-haired girl behind him. "Ah, Morgiana." "Morg-chan?" Tamamo questioned. "Ah, you're finally here." She leapt from her seat and hugged the smaller girl happily. "But Mordred grunted. "I figured she'd have been the first one here." "Hello, Tamamo ni-chan," the redhead greeted me. "Hello Mordred. Hello Uncle Alciel. It's Issei in this country." Issei, however, was annoyed. Why does he still get the uncle while I get nothing? The others turned to him pityingly while the girl in question pouted once again. "What?" "Anyway, Issei-sama," Issei began. "Don't change the subject." The white-haired man ignored him. "I apologize for earlier today," he bowed. "I should not have placed the blame solely on you." "Yeah, you're supposed to be his most resourceful general." Tamamo cracked as she and Morgiana sat together at the Katatsu. "If anyone should be blamed, it's you." Issei sputtered indignantly. But it wasn't my fault either," he exclaimed. "Besides, the biggest money burner is Mordred buying gas for her bike." Everyone turned to the blonde, who just glared back at them, daring them to say something. They turned back to Issei. "This isn't fair." The white-haired man cried, tears streaming down his face. "Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" "I never said that." Issei suddenly snapped, eyes glowing dangerously. "You didn't hear anything." "Agreed. Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl? Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl? Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" They all turned to see Chachamaru holding a tape recorder, a shit-eating grin on her face. "Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" Issei slowly fell to his knees, despair evident on his face. "Why? For the 5th time in the past 20 minutes. Was it so hard for someone to be on time?" "Ah, well," he mused. "It's not as though I've got anything else to do." As it was the weekend, their group was free for the next 2 days. And due to their current financial situation, the girls had found it imperative to get jobs. Apparently Tamamo found one at a cosplay cafe downtown. Morgiana decided to make use of her physical strength at a construction site. They would pay her daily depending on how well she performed. Meanwhile, Issei was taking the day off to catch up on the housework that had been building up over the week. Mordred was off extorting money from her gang. And since McDonald's had closed for renovations, Issei had nothing to do. Then thankfully, depending on how one looked at it, he'd received a call from Amano Yuma. The girl asked whether or not he was free, and now here he was, leaning against a lamppost in the town square, waiting for his date to show up. Issei took another glance at the plastic watch he'd won out of his cereal box. What? It wasn't as though he could afford a real one. Here, take a flyer, a voice spoke up. Issei glanced at the speaker. It was an older, dark-haired woman wearing some sort of strange vampire cosplay. He looked over the flyer with passing curiosity. It was a magic circle with a Gremory crest emblazoned smack dab in the center. He glanced up at the woman, a single eyebrow raised. She winked at him and gestured at the pamphlet once more before walking off. Issei turned it over to see a message written in the devil's language. Enjoy your date. Was she spying on him? He turned it over again and took a closer look at the circle. After several moments of inspection, he realized that it was a reverse summoning circle. It would allow him to instantly be transported to wherever it was keyed to, which in this case, would most likely be the club room. They were especially useful for quick getaways. Why, isn't she thoughtful? He smirked just as his date finally arrived. I'm sorry. The girl exclaimed, bowing to him in apology. Were you waiting long? Oh, no, just about half an hour, I'd say. Issei said easily. The girl looked startled at his bluntness before flushing in embarrassment. Anyway, let's get going, yeah. Okay, Yuma agreed. Oh, ice-kun. If it's not too much trouble, could we be back by sunset? Sunset? The brown-haired boy smirked at her. But the best part takes place at night. He watched in mild amusement as his words bounced around in her head, her face flushed red. What's that supposed to mean? Issei looked back at her in faux confusion. Why, the parties of course. He exclaimed. I hear there's going to be a huge one downtown tonight. He chuckled as left the black-haired girl sputtering behind him. Meanwhile, said girl was having conflicting thoughts. What the hell? He's not acting at all like I thought he would. Where's the meek polite boy I've been watching for the past few weeks? She took a good look at his attire. A dark leather jacket over a white shirt and dark jeans. His hair was also uncharacteristically gelled. The girl had to admit, he looked good. And when he led her around the corner, she was shocked even further. Hop on, he said, throwing a leg over a sleek red Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300 RSA smirked at her as he donned a pair of black shades. It had taken a good 3 hours for him to convince Mordred to lend him her baby as she put it. He'd only gotten her to agree after promising to go riding with her next time. Now he had 2 dates to worry about after this. One with Tamamo and one with Mordred. Lucky me, Issei grumbled to himself, knowing full well that their finances would not survive such an assault. Is this yours? The shocked girl asked. Issei responded by patting the spot behind him. Come on, princess, he grinned. This is our first date. We've got to make it one to remember. Yuma hesitated before climbing on behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. With a roar of the engine, the pair took off at breakneck speed. He let out a laugh as the girl squeaked and tightened her grip on him. This'll be fun, Issei grinned. Thank you for your patronage. Tamamo said, bowing politely at her customers retreating back. Wow, you sure are popular, Tamamo-san. A short brown-haired girl exclaimed. The fox girl grinned at her. But of course, was her haughty reply. Anyone would be eager to be served by one such as myself, Chiho-chan. Tamamo was currently in her cosplay outfit, which consisted of a tight black bodice with frilly gray endings and tied with bright yellow straps. The arms of her outfit were loose and allowed her free movement. A pair of black stockings covered her legs, leaving only the skin of her thighs exposed. Her dark blue hair ribbon had been replaced by a turquoise one, and a small top hat perched perilously atop her head. The outfit left much of her cleavage exposed. Which was probably the biggest contributor to her popularity, her natural beauty and supernatural allure aside. The girl she was currently speaking to was Sasaki Chiho, one of Issei's co-workers. She had short brown hair that fell to her chin and chocolate-colored eyes. Her hair sported 2 pink ribbons on either side of her head. Her outfit consisted of a dark blue blazer with a plaid ribbon tied at her neck and a short green skirt. She wore black knee-high socks and brown leather shoes. But the biggest eye-catcher was her assets. They're huge. Tamamo mentally raged. How does such a tiny girl have such huge breasts? Chiho, of course, was completely oblivious to the fox girl's jealous ravings. You look so mature. The girl gushed. Moo. I'm so jealous. The shop's doorbell chimed, drawing the fox girls' attention away from their chat. "Welcome," Tamamo exclaimed cheerfully, only for her face to drop upon seeing who just stepped in. "Oh, it's you." "Thanks," Mordred said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What do you want?" the fox asked in a bored tone. "No money, no service." "I've got money," the blonde retorted before snapping her fingers. Immediately, a bald man in a leather jacket appeared, handing her a 10,000 yen note. The man then bowed at them before dashing back outside. The other two girls stared after the retreating gang member before turning back to the smug blonde. "The table for one," the knight demanded. "I'm sorry, we seem to have run out of tables." "Like hell." "Please, miss, you're disturbing the other customers," Tamamo said calmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Fuck you." The blonde girl snarled, looking ready to summon her sword at any moment. Tamamo-san?" Chiho asked meekly. "Please don't fight. I don't mind sharing my table with her if she doesn't mind." "HMPH," Mordred grunted. "Well, at least some people have manners." "You're one to talk," Tamamo growled just as her smartphone began letting out a series of rings. She reached into her pocket and pulled it out. The girl cleaned the screen off before reading the message she'd just been sent. "I see," she murmured, powering down her phone and pulling out a pen and notepad. "Alright blondie, what do you want? The banana spit? The spit beer float? Or the spit parfait?" Taiho slowly sank down into her seat as their argument intensified. "Where did it go wrong?" Yuma wondered, resting her cheek against Issei's back as he drove them back into the city. Or perhaps a better question would be, why did it all go so right? She had intended to spend a boring day with an equally boring boy. She was supposed to use every moment of boredom she'd suffered as motivation to kill him. Instead, she'd found herself following him all over the prefecture, bouncing from venue to venue. He'd taken her to every place she could have imagined, and against all reasoning, she'd found herself having fun with him. And that terrified her. Haidu Issei had to die. That was her assignment. It was the sole reason she'd asked him out in the first place. And here she was getting attached to him, the boy she was supposed to murder. Unconsciously, her grip on his waist tightened, prompting Issei to raise an eyebrow. "You okay?" he called back to her. She didn't reply for several moments. "Yeah, I'm fine," it's just whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the sound of several other motorcycles surrounding them. "Boy, bastard," one of the riders shouted over the wind. Issei vaguely recognized him as one of Mordred's biker gang members. "Eneki told us you had a date today. She said not to worry about it," another shouted. "But we can't just let you off the hook like that. Isn't she enough for you?" The first one, who appeared to be their leader, cried. "Die." "Boy, Yuma," Issei shouted. "Hold on tight. What are you going to do? Oh, she shrieked as he suddenly accelerated. The others gave chase, but shit, he's pretty good. One of them cried as Issei easily weaved through the evening traffic. "Of course," another shouted back. "I'd expect nothing less from one of Eneki's friends. Stop admiring him and catch up to him," the leader shouted. But by then the brown-haired boy was too far ahead of them. He swerved around the corner, spotting his destination just ahead. He vaguely heard Yuma squeak behind him as he drove right over the edge of the highway and into the park some 15 meters below, expertly positioning the bike to soften the impact. Immediately swerving behind a tree, Issei killed the engine and waited silently. Only when sounds of their pursuers' engines faded into the distance did he allow himself to relax. He glanced at the still shocked Yuma behind him and began chuckling. The black-haired girl was broken out of her daze by the sound and looked up at his grinning face. Her face suddenly felt hot, but surely it was just from the humidity. She clutched at her chest, where she could feel her heart pounding furiously. Surely it was just from the excitement of the chase that had just ended. But as he smiled at her, she wasn't so sure. Slowly, she found herself laughing with him. Issei helped her off the bike and propped it up against the tree. Taking her by the hand, he led her over to the fountain and plopped down. Yuma sat down beside him. "Well, here we are," he said. When she gave him a confused glance, he leaned in closer to her. "You wanted me to take you to the park at sunset, right? Did you have something you wanted to do here?" Somehow, she seemed to flush and pale at the same time. Aye. Yes?" Issei asked, his smile warm. As she looked into his eyes, she seemed to hesitate even more. "Would you?" "Ah, wait. I almost forgot," he said with a sheepish grin before reaching into his pocket and bringing out a thin silver chain with a small heart dangling from it. "It's not much, but here." He took her hand and clapped it to her wrist. "It's a charm bracelet," he explained. "I've had it for some time now, but I've never bothered to buy more charms for it. So, I'll give it to you and I'll get you a new charm for every date we go on, alright?" What a stupid gift, and yet. "So, what was it you were going to say?" he asked with an easygoing smile. "Would you take me on another date someday?" Issei didn't get a chance to respond before she suddenly leaned forward, capturing his lips with her own. The kiss lasted for several moments. It was neither chaste nor passionate. It was hesitant but sincere. And in both of their minds, it was perfect. As they broke away, Issei smiled at her once again. You can count on it. Yuma graced him with a small smile of her own before stepping away from him. I had a lot of fun today, Ice-kun, she said. See you soon. And with that, she rushed away. Issei watched her go, fully aware that he was being approached from behind. Well, you sure seemed to enjoy that, Tamamo said dryly. I would be lying if I said I didn't, Issei admitted. He glanced at her outfit. What are you wearing? Tamamo, who was still in her cosplay, did a little twirl and winked at him. Do you like it? It's my work uniform. Can't say I don't, he said neutrally as Mordred walked over, pushing her bike towards them. You know what to do from here, right? The fox waved him off. Yeah. Take this, Issei handed her the reverse summoning circle Rias had given him earlier today. Use it in the case of an emergency. Tamamo took the proffered pamphlet and gave him a mock salute. Poof. From the smoke, a pigeon flew out in the direction Yuma had left. Issei watched it go for a while until the sound of an engine revving up behind him drew his attention. Where to, master? Mordred asked as she donned a pair of sunglasses. The club room, please, Issei replied as he mounted the bike behind her. If something happens, Tamamo will most likely appear there. Plus, I believe Rias wishes to know how it went. The blonde shrugged before slamming on the gas. Rainer glanced nervously as she entered the church. Ever since the exorcists had been found dead beneath the altar, everyone had been on edge when coming and going. Except Fried. He would just squeal gleefully whenever the harsh scent of death washed over him. He creeped her out, to be honest. She would have killed him herself if Donaseek hadn't insisted that they needed him. Well, how did it go? A buxom woman with long, navy blue hair asked. It was Calawarner, one of her fellow fallen angels. Did he squeal like a pig when you got him? It was Mittelt, a younger angel with dirty blonde hair tied up in pigtails. A tall, middle-aged man wearing a trench coat and fedora watched her reaction carefully and apparently found something unsatisfactory. You didn't kill him. Donaseek accused. When she flinched, his suspicion was confirmed. Why? The black-haired angel quickly compassed herself. We still don't know for sure whether or not he possesses the sacred gear, she said tersely. I see no reason to kill anyone if they don't possess it. I don't believe it, Mittelt giggled. Don't tell me you actually fell for that guy. Like hell. Rainer cried, though the blush on her face betrayed her. The others broke out into laughter. Listen, Ray, Calawarner began, wiping a tear from her eye. He's just a human. You'll get over it sooner or later. Yeah, the blonde girl continued, still giggling. Once the plan succeeds, I'm sure Azazel-sama will be all over you. Rainer smiled weakly before it slid into a frown. Still, I don't think he's carrying the gear. Donaseek heaved an exasperated sigh. Well, lucky you, he smirked. Cause we've just confirmed it. He's not carrying it. The black-haired girl visibly relaxed after hearing his words. So it's the girl, then? The sole male of their group grinned. Sure is, he nodded. I saw her at that new cafe that opened downtown. Unlike you, I'm not going to risk getting attached. I plan on dealing with her right now. As he said this, a pair of black angel wings sprouted from his shoulders. I'll be back late, Donaseek said as he took off out the window. Don't wait up. Unknown to them, a small pigeon had witnessed the entire conversation. With a look of worry, the bird disappeared in a flash of red light. Welcome back, Issei-kun, Rias greeted them as he and Mordred entered the club room. She and Akeno were the only ones there. Kiba and Kaneko were likely off providing services. Ara, Akeno said, her voice teasing. I hear you were on a date, Issei-kun. How cruel to Tamamo Dono and Mordred Dono. I imagine they're already planning to pay me back in full, the brown-haired boy grumbled. He winced as the blonde girl elbowed him in the stomach. And how did your date go, Issei-kun? Rias questioned curiously. Surprisingly well, he answered. Though it was obvious she had been planning something, it seemed to fall apart as the date progressed. I saw the conflict in her eyes before she left. Ara, how romantic, the black-haired Queen said, placing a hand to her cheek. A forbidden love, not that she knows it's forbidden. Not quite as forbidden as you might think, Issei admitted. You know the fallen angel Shem has eye. He's one of the Gregory, isn't he? The vice-governor general, he nodded. He actually married a devil woman some time ago. You're kidding. The two girls looked shocked. I'm not, Issei smirked. I don't know if she was a member of the Pillars, but Azazel informed me that she was indeed a devil. But, why would Azazel tell you, one of his enemies, this? Akeno asked with a dark brown marrying her lovely features. Issei raised an eyebrow. She seemed unusually hostile about this. Did she have something against fallen angels? Perhaps that was a stupid question. All devils disliked angels, fallen or otherwise, on principle alone. Of all the three factions leaders, Azazel is the most peaceful, Issei explained. At the end of the Great War, he and his Gregory were the first to retreat. He has been adamantly anti-war since then. Of course, not all the Gregory agreed with this, Mordred added from the couch she was currently lounging on, casually swinging her leg as though she owned the place. This is why we're currently trying to hunt down a traitor. And to be honest, I think I know who it is, Issei muttered. Really, who is it? Riaz asked, but the boy shook his head. I'm not going to make any accusations, he said firmly. Not until we've got proof. But I can tell you that during the war, one of Azazel's subordinates was particularly vicious in his methods. Riaz looked like she wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a magic circle suddenly shimmering into existence. Tamamo has returned, Issei said, standing up. Mordred copied his action, her earlier relaxed attitude gone. As the light faded, they saw the fox girl with an unusually serious expression. They're making their move, she reported. The male of their group is going after the true sacred gear user. She looked at Issei solemnly. He's going after Chaiho. The fox girl suddenly clutched her chest, wide-eyed. What's wrong? Issei asked in concern. They've made contact, she hissed. We have to move now. Issei nodded. Prepare for transport. We'll go with you, Riaz offered. The boy didn't bother to reply, instead he had whipped out his cell phone. Ashia, Issei barked when the other man picked up. It's time. You know what to do. He hung up and turned to the others who had gathered around Tamamo. Let's go. In a flash of blue light, the group appeared in the residential area of the city. The smell of blood permeated through the air, and they immediately spotted a crumpled form on the floor. Chaiho! Issei exclaimed. He cradled her in his arms and felt her neck. Her pulse was weakening. Tamamo. I'm on it, the fox nodded. She paused. Master, the fallen angel is still in the area. You can probably catch him. Issei glanced at Chaiho still in his arms before nodding. Alright, take care of her, Tamamo. He gently handed the prone girl over before standing. Riaz, Akeno, assist Tamamo. Iridid nodded. Very well. Ara, the black-haired girl said sensually. So aggressive today, Issei-kun. But if you insist. Issei turned to the blonde girl beside him. Mordred, go. The knight nodded before crouching low and disappearing in a show of pure speed. The brown-haired boy glanced at them once more before disappearing as well. Tamamo returned her attention to the wounded girl in her arms before closing her eyes and beginning a healing ritual. Riaz assisted her, channeling her own healing magic, while Akeno set to cleaning up the blood that had splattered on the walls and sidewalk. After several minutes, Tamamo opened her eyes. There was something wrong. She's not responding, she said urgently, causing Riaz's brow to furrow. She placed her fingers on the girl's neck. Her pulse is weakening as well, the Redid muttered. Is her body resisting the healing spell? Damn it. Tamamo growled. Don't you dare die on me, Chaiho. I promised master that I'd take care of you, and I refuse to lie to my master. I have an idea, Riaz said, prompting Tamamo to raise an eyebrow at her. The girl's voice sounded far too sly. And I have a feeling you know what it is. You want her, Tamamo said bluntly. Riaz merely smiled. The fox glared at her for a moment before sighing. Riaz obviously wanted to turn Chaiho into a devil. While doing so would most likely assist in their healing, it would also turn the girl into her servant. While not ideal, Tamamo knew her master possessed no evil pieces, and he likely didn't want Riaz knowing that he could reincarnate people without them. At least she knew Chaiho would be serving under a kind master. The Gremory clan was well known for their great affection for their servants, after all. I suppose we have no choice, then, Tamamo muttered. She nodded at the Redid. Do it. That was way too easy, Donasik mused to himself as he flew back towards the church at a leisurely pace. I'll have to rub it into Rainer's face when I get back. Next time, she can't get attached to the target. However, in his musing, he failed to notice a figure approaching him at blinding speed until a searing pain surged through his back. Arg. He grunted in agony as he suddenly found himself crashing into the ground. He looked back at his wings to see a long cut on both of them. It wasn't enough to cause permanent damage, but it was more than enough to keep him from flying. That was way too easy, a voice complained, unknowingly copying his earlier thoughts. He looked up to see a figure, completely encased in a suit of heavy red and silver armor. A horned helm obscured the knight's face, leaving him unable to tell his assailant's gender. Hey, angel boy, if it were up to me, you'd be dead already. But fortunately for you, we need you alive. Who the hell are you? He could feel her aura. It was incredibly powerful. It was terrifying, actually. Are you a devil? Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to discuss things with you, the figure said, placing a sword at his neck. That would be my job, another voice called out. Donasik looked up to see the same boy Rainer had become smitten with approaching them. You. he cried. But you're just a human. Appearances can be deceiving, Detenshi-san. And what the hell do you want with me? Donosik demanded. We haven't done anything to you. Not to me, no, Issei admitted. But you've brazenly attacked one of my friends, who happens to be a sacred gear user. I thought Azazel wanted to study sacred gears. Wouldn't killing their users be detrimental to that? We had orders to kill that girl, the injured fallen angel growled. Wait, why am I explaining myself to you? He flexed his fingers, wanting to summon a light spear, but the sword at his neck prevented him from doing anything. You're right, Issei chuckled. You technically don't have to answer me. He smirked. But I know someone you do have to answer to. The fallen angel sneered at him. And who would that be? That would be me, Donosik, yet another voice called out. The older man paled upon hearing this voice, and they turned to see a magic circle appearing several meters behind them. From within the circle, 3 figures emerged. Azazel-sama, Donosik whimpered. I apologize for taking so long, Issei-sama, Ashia said, bowing slightly. I was picking up Morgiana when you called me. The redeed in question was currently gazing down at Donosik, an emotionless expression on her face. Yeah, sorry for being late, Azazel said cheerfully. I was really surprised when Alciel suddenly showed up in the middle of my office. I almost attacked him, you know. If you did, Morgiana would have kicked your face in, Issei said with a smirk. Azazel glanced at the tiny girl and shuddered. He knew firsthand how powerful those limbs of hers were. Wait, Donosik whispered. Did you say Alciel? As in, one of the great angel generals that sided with Lucifer when he became a devil. The very same Azazel smiled as 10 pure black wings appeared from Asia's back. The white-haired man stared at the fallen man coldly. Donosik turned his terrified gaze towards Issei. And you're his master? He whimpered. But Alciel only served one person. He's dead. You're supposed to be dead. Who the hell are you? Issei chuckled before crouching down to his level. His eyes suddenly turned burning red. Quite frankly, I'm your worst nightmare, he whispered as a truly demonic grin stretched across his face. Suddenly, an overwhelming force slammed against Donosik's mind, causing his eyes to roll back and making him stammer incoherently before blacking out. There was silence for several moments before Azazel finally spoke up. Well, I thank you for your cooperation, he nodded at Issei. I'll be taking him into custody for interrogation. You should be aware that the other fallen angels remain active, Issei said, his eyes returning to their dull brown color. This one acted independently tonight. The Governor General nodded. I'm aware of that, he replied. Their assignment was to observe the sacred gear user, but it seems that whoever is giving them their orders deviated from mine. You know what she carries, don't you? Issei said accusingly. The governor grinned at him cheekily. I do, but I'll let you figure it out. He cackled. Hopefully we can get a name from this one, Ashia remarked before Issei could retort. Donosik, his name was. Azazel nodded. I'll send a message to the others stationed here that Donosik was recalled to avoid questions about his disappearance. Have you heard anything about a nun from Europe coming here? Issei suddenly asked. The governor frowned thoughtfully. No, can't say I have, he admitted. Why do you ask? The others seem to have plans involving her, the brown-haired boy replied. Azazel frowned. I don't know anything about this, he muttered. This traitor must be growing bolder. He's acting completely independently from me now. I'll keep an eye on them, Issei said. And I'll keep you informed if I learn anything. Thank you, the governor nodded. He pointed at the unconscious Donosik, who began levitating. Walking a short distance away, a magic circle appeared beneath them. I'll leave it to you. You prefer going by Issei nowadays, right? The brown-haired boy nodded as the Azazel and Donosik disappeared in a flash of light. With a small sigh, Issei turned to his gathered servants. Well, let's go check on the others. He had sensed a large infusion of devil magic earlier, so he already had a feeling of what had transpired in his absence. As they rounded the corner, he was not surprised to see Chiho still unconscious in Ria's arms. Tamamo immediately bowed to him submissively as he came into sight. Master, I was unable to heal Chiho, she said shamefully. Ria's home had to reincarnate her. I apologize for this failure. Issei chuckled slightly. It's fine, Tamamo, he said easily. Quite frankly, I already suspected Ria's intentions when she asked to come with us. Ria's grinned at him. Sorry, Issei-kun, she said with a coy smile. I'm a devil, greed is in my blood. I likely would have done the same, were I in your shoes, Issei nodded. And what piece did she take? I was actually quite shocked, Ria's replied. She actually took up all 8 of my PAWN pieces. Issei raised an eyebrow in surprise. Her sacred gear must be incredible, he remarked. He put on a mock frustrated expression. And I just gave her to you. Ria's giggled. Sorry, first come, first served, she teased. Anyway, she's completely healed now. Normally, a wound like that would take quite a while to heal, but Tamamo-san's healing ritual worked wonders. Issei nodded. Yes, she's quite talented, he said, causing the fox girl to perk up at his praise. You should probably get her home. I presume you already know where that is? The red-haired girl nodded. I memorized the homes of all your co-workers, she admitted. As a precaution. Then I'll leave it to you, he said before nodding towards Issei. The white-haired man nodded in return and summoned a magic circle beneath them. See you Monday, Ria-senpai, Akeno-senpai. With that, the group of 5 disappeared in a flash of blue light. Ugh, what an exhausting day, Issei sighed as he plopped down at the kotatsu. It certainly was exciting, wasn't it? Issei sighed as he, too, sat down. Not exciting enough, Mordred grunted. That fallen angel was such a pansy. I need more action than that. So long as it ends favorably, I'm fine with it, Issei shrugged. If Issei-sama is happy, I'm happy, Morgiana said quietly. Same here, Tamamo chimed in. Nah, master. I made a lot of money off tips today. Oh, did you? Issei smiled. The fox girl grinned at him, reaching into a pocket hidden in her sleeve and pulled out a wad of cash. Yup, 15,000 yen, she bragged. Issei patted her on the head. Great job, he said as Mordred scoffed. Please, I managed to get 25,000. Extortion is a criminal offense, Mordred-chan, the fox girl taunted, though her glare was icy. Issei pointedly ignored their impending argument. And how did you do, Morgiana? Irideed glanced at him before placing her pay on the table. The entire group froze as they stared at the stack of 10,000 yen notes. How much is that? Mordred stammered. I thought you were doing construction work. Morgiana shrugged. I'm a hard worker. Issei snorted. I saw what she was doing, he said. She single-handedly finished the construction. But all they had this morning was the foundation. The blonde cried. Issei nodded. I know, he ignored Mordred's furious, incoherent muttering. She even managed to get a contract with the supervisor. Morg-chan. Tamamo embraced the Irideed, tears rapidly falling down her face. With this, we can go eat a decent meal at last. Morgiana awkwardly patted her on the back as the fox girl sobbed all over her shoulder. Alright, Issei nodded. In celebration, why don't we go out to eat tonight? What do you guys want? Sukiyaki. Tamamo cried. Issei looked at the others. Issei and Morgiana didn't mind, and Mordred was still stammering incoherently. Alright, sukiyaki it is, he smiled. As the group left to go eat, a certain puppet was left behind to wonder why she hadn't been invited to any of the day's events. The fact that she still reeked of exorcist blood was completely irrelevant. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the King of Plot Bunnies for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.